So thank you all for coming here today. Very excited about our speaker. But before we get started, for those of you that are new to us or programming, we are the Chicago Graphic Design Club. We are a community for designers to engage in conversation about all the theory, craft, and practice of graphic design, not just in Chicago, but also beyond. We're a fairly young organization. We've only been around for about a year and a half. We actually got started last year, right in the middle of the pandemic in May. So over the past couple of months, we've been having the privilege to have a lot of speakers, a lot of book discussions and workshops and whatnot. So if anyone is ever interested in getting involved, or if anyone wants to keep up with the kind of events that we do, you could follow us on our Instagram, you could follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or you could go to our website, chicagographicdesign.club, and you'll be able to find all of our upcoming programming. And because we are community-led, community-focused, a lot of the programming that we put out is programming that people ask for. So if anyone at any point has any ideas or any suggestions or wants to simply get involved with our group, our door is always open. We're a grassroots organization, so everything that we do is volunteer-based. You can shoot us a message at our email, info@chicagographicdesign.club, or you could just send us a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or just go on our website as well. And we also have a Slack group that we've been growing over the past year or so. If you're not familiar with Slack, it's an instant messaging platform. We have a lot of different rooms on there that talk about, people come in asking for feedback on work, people ask questions, people talk about design, people introduce themselves. We have about 150 members right now. So if anyone is ever interested in having conversations with other creatives, you're always welcome. And you could join by going to our website. We have a big link on our homepage.
Yeah, I could add to that. I normally don't do social media, but I think the Slack group for me is so beneficial because any conversation about design history, or even like, hey, I'll be in Detroit next weekend. Does anyone know any museums or cool things going on there? I feel like I've gotten a lot out of this Slack community for that reason. So yeah, I think it would be great to see everybody there.
Yep, and it's growing, so it'll only get better with if you join. And we also, as mentioned earlier, because we are community focused, we're always looking for ideas and we're always asking people what they want to see out of our organization. So if anyone is interested, we do have a survey on our website where we ask the simple question, what would you like to see in the design community? So if anyone is interested in, providing some feedback, suggestions, it's a very quick survey. It takes a couple of minutes. So you could go check that out on our website. And with that said, Patrick, do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up?
Sure. We have an office hours program that we usually either gather virtually and sometimes in person. And I think we're planning one for a couple weeks out in October. So follow the socials for that. We're gonna have more details on a book discussion soon. We're talking about going through Caps Lock. So that's another program that will be coming, more details that come. And then we're in the final stages of the development for podcasts for the club. It'll include a variety of guests and topics centered around Chicago and beyond, the Chicago design community and beyond. If you're interested in being a guest or nominating somebody, you could always email us at info@chicagographicdesign.club. At some point, we'll have a form that people can fill out, much like the survey, to learn more about it or be a guest. And then we'll have more details that come on that before the end of the year. And again, for the latest and greatest, make sure you follow our Instagram or LinkedIn, and we'll be posting things in the very near future on all three of these with more details on each event.
Awesome. So with that said, we are very excited to be welcoming our speaker, Surbhi Kalra. She is a design lead at ChiByDesign, an amazing organization that caught my attention a few months ago, actually. They're doing a lot of great work in the inclusive design space. They're doing a lot of work with communities and really kind of redefining what it means to design for people and to design with your community as opposed to designing for. So with that said, we are going to be doing a Q&A towards the end. So if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat or just hold them. And in about the last 15 minutes or so, you should be able to unmute yourself. Or if you type a question in the chat, one of us will also read it. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand it over to you, Surbhi.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here and joining me and spending your evening listening to me. I'm quickly going to share my screen. Can anyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Cool. So yeah, as Christian introduced, I'm the design leader at ChiByDesign. But something that I wanted to talk about, and as I'm meeting many new people here, let me start by introducing myself. Some of the titles that I hold, apart from being a design leader at ChiByDesign, is being a researcher, being a strategist, being a visual communicator, problem solver, and so forth. But above all, I think something that's very important to me is, which I identify quite well, is that I'm a student. Recently, my colleague described me as a student of life, and I think it resonated with me very well, because I think anything that happens in my personal life, I take that as a lesson and I learn from it, and I try to see how can I bring my work and my personal life together with it. So it resonated with me quite well, and it got me reflecting on how this mindset of mine has shaped all my major decisions. I remember spending most of my summer learning something new, something creative, whether it was about like making blouses and understanding the science behind it, aka fashion design, or spending time in the garden where my mom was teaching me how to make vegetables out of clay, aka product design. And I didn't realize until very late that moments like this and experiences like this all culminated in me choosing the path less taken and entering the design world. And when I say choosing the path less taken, I really mean it, because from my hometown, there were not a lot of people around me who were designers, who were creatives. I had a lot of engineers and doctors around me for sure. So it was a journey to finding like what design and like what is it, what do I want to do? So I ended up coming to Shashank School of Design back in India to do my bachelor's in visual communication design. I did everything graphic related to branding, merchandising, typography, like color psychology, you name it, typical graphic design education. And then I worked for 1.5 years as a visualizer, as a UXer, and trying to understand and like blend my graphics, and also trying to know more about the design industry. But something that I was missing was like the why component of why am I doing something, or I really wanted to go into the deeper things of why something is happening, or more of the core things. And I think that curiosity, that attitude of mine, and got me into here in Chicago at Institute of Design. And I did my master's here and got exposed to some really good opportunities, experiences. I remember in my first semester, I got exposed to this sustainable solutions kind of a workshop where I was talking about food and composting. And I remember giving a call to my mom and saying, I have never seen anything like this. And it's not like there's things like this don't exist, it's that there was lack of awareness and lack of exposure to things like this and why some things are happening. All these questions started getting answered here. All these experiences, and then I started taking more opportunities, internships, job, as I was getting exposed to different disciplines. And then all of that played a very crucial role in me being as a professional, as a designer, and I was just seeing what all world has to offer to me. And so I started doing some full-time job and then internships. So now the main question, how did I end up here? I met Chris during my time at IT, and Chris Stratt is the founder and CEO of ChiByDesign. He's also present on this call. And I got to know about him and his work. But it wasn't until later when I graduated and I connected with him very randomly because he wanted to learn in design. Then I got to know more about his work, his ideologies, his approach to design, his work in social design space, and how that is so different. And while that, and like months later, I was working on my full-time job at a corporate, big fintech company. And I was presented with this very corporate culture, and I was presented with this opportunity to do a part-time role for as a design lead in a social design project and work with on a project regarding community colleges. And I think I was like, okay, I'm already doing a full-time job. There's always this tension of social design and corporate culture between designers, and we always struggle with this. But I think it was my upbringing of when I've seen my parents doing good, like my interest in social design space since I was in India, that I was like, okay, I have to take this leap. I have to see what it has to offer to me. I know I'd be working like more than 40 hours a week, but like, let me just take this and see where it goes. And that's how my journey with ChiByDesign began. And I was kind of playing like this double role where I was in this corporate culture during the daytime, and in the evening I was working in the social justice space. There was a lot of like tensions, a lot of like learning. They both prepared me in a very different ways. Somehow each fed into the other. But I think that tension was good in like me thinking of how do I want to approach design and how do I want to work with it. This is our team picture here where we created a GIF. But when I started working with ChiByDesign, I soon realized that this is not a very traditional place to work. It's no way traditional. I had to unlearn some very ingrained approaches about work culture, about design. And I think it challenged almost everything. Like very simple things, like even working as a design lead at a certain age, like you have certain biases, like when you consider a lead position, you see there is an image that pops up in your head, but it challenged all of that. Like it created, like I realized that this was a place where experiences and who you are valued more than your academic credentials. And I think that as well as that attracted me quite a bit. And that got me more to learn about what's the DNA of like ChiByDesign. And what is it that was very exciting for me. And soon I realized that this was a place which was purpose-driven. Chris started this company based on his ideologies, his perspective on anti-racism and what does it mean and like how the world should be different. That was very much purpose-driven. Like it grounds, it's grounded in something which has to create an impact in the people that we're working with. Co-creation. Until the time I interacted with ChiByDesign, I didn't realize that, you know, when you're working with people, how different it could be when you're working for them and when you're designing for the communities rather than designing with communities. And how soul-filling it feels when you are working with people and also equipping them with resources that can improve their well-being. That was all connecting like really home to me. That was like diverse perspectives, and it's not just a buzzword here. It's not just for like because it's a popular thing right now. When Chris started this company, it was all about like there are projects happening in Chicago and all over the country where the firms that were predominantly handling these projects were white and male. And he knew that there's no way a monolith of designers could understand the nuance of experience in diverse communities. And furthermore, there was no way that they should design the future of communities of color. And that was a big thing because you're already starting to think in a way which is more diverse. So you don't have to think about, oh, we have to bring in diverse perspectives. You know that you are a team who brings in diverse perspective in the foundation itself. And the fourth piece was, this was very crucial for me, was care. And this reflects in a lot of way in our team culture and in how I behave. There's a space and culture for you to grow as an individual as well, to be your own, to bring your viewpoint, your worldview, your ideologies, who you are. And all of these values connected a lot with me on my personal level. And this was in the beginning. So in the beginning, ChiByDesign was just one person. So I knew what I was walking into. As an international student, you always have this tension of, where do you want to be? And due to many other reasons, but I think these were these purpose, the purpose and the DNA and my values, I think they aligned really well. And growing up in a family, I was taught that, okay, do good with good intentions, care for people, treat people in a way that you want to be treated, be honest in your approach, and have relationships, have a place where you can thrive, like not like work. And I've always believed in that. I think since the day I joined design, that I'm going to be working in a place or that I don't feel like it's work. It feels like, oh, I'm like with people, I'm doing something good. It doesn't have to stress me out that it's a 9-to-5 job. And I didn't feel that I had to like shift gears of who I am in my personal life and, have to be someone completely different. I knew I'm just like bringing what I am, what I'm personally, and like I'm informing my personal goals, my personal viewpoints into work with care, with intention, and learning from here and seeing how that's also growing me as an individual. And it's very much like I think about the culture. As I was talking about like learning and unlearning certain things, right? And we've grown up thinking that there is a certain culture that you have to fit to. A company culture is supposed to be such and such things. But I think that thought process or that thinking was broken when I saw that, no, you can co-create the culture with the people you work with. Is the people who you work with more important than trying to fit them into particular boxes? So I think all of this like just culminated in me was like, okay, this is a place where, I don't have to, it doesn't feel like work. And as I introduced ChiByDesign, this was, as it was started with an anti-racist perspective. And as we were co-creating this team and like building the plane as we were flying it, we came together as a team and we started thinking of what is our collective vision? Who are we? What do we believe in? How do we act? How do we show up? And recently in our retreat, we defined that we are the boldest anti-racist design firm to create a just future with you. It's a Black-owned, people of color-led, Chicago-based social and civic impact design firm that's people-centered and grounds its work in a co-design approach. If you see just the first line, boldest, anti-racist, co-creation, just future. These are like the words, they might seem that might be like buzzwords, but this is something with the DNA and like our thinking, because we collectively co-created it, it's easier to see how it translates into our work. And it's an accountability factor to see that we translate this thinking into our work as well. I'm going to just touch upon these two crucial points of co-design and anti-racist design. Co-design is like an approach of designing with people and not for people. Requires sharing power, prioritizing relationships, using participatory means, and building capacity. This is a quote from Kelly's book, Beyond Sticky Notes. And this is something that I think we take to heart as well, because you're designing with people and not for people. I think your approaches, and as a designer, when you think that you're working for a company or a firm who you're just designing for someone based on their needs, versus when you're co-creating a future with them, it's entirely different. For me, it kind of started giving me a chance of, at one point, like as I was telling that, I took the path less taken. I didn't have much awareness about design. I didn't know what it is, what are we doing? Like there were many projects running around us, but we were not included as people into what that looks like. So this is a chance, this gives me a chance to like give back my expertise. And if any of our people who work with us, who we call co-designers, And if it touches their life, it changes their life in any like small way, I think that's a success for me as well. It's like you are equipping them, and they're not just there for like, like we were working on a project, my first initial project, and there were co-designers with us, and I had to unlearn that what responsibility, accountability, and all these things mean when you're not working in a traditional design team. It was us as professionals, but the people who are working with us also have other things going on in their lives. So I had to like see what does that mean? How do we accommodate for that? They are the experts, we are not the experts. So their viewpoint and position is much more important and crucial than us. How do we have that power sharing piece in it? So there was a lot during that time, I think, when I started getting hang of co-design and like how this is so different from the traditional design approach, and how you have to shift your mindset and thinking when you're working with people. Second crucial component of what we do and is being anti-racist. And two of the ways that it differs from equity is we identify how racism is embedded in the problem that we are addressing. We bring it to the forefront. And second is focus on multi-level interventions that enable collective anti-racist actions. I'll go into detail about this, but it's a point of view that we understand that, okay, racism in the center of it. We understand that there's systemic racism there. We don't want to shy away from it. We want to speak about it and see how it impacts interpersonal lives, from structural level to experience level to all of it. So overall, I didn't speak to like human-centered design and systems thinking, but because I wanted to focus more on anti-racist and co-design piece. But this is what like currently our approach looks like, where we bring human-centered design mindsets and systems thinking with a very anti-racist lens and grounding our approach in co-design. But we also understand that there are different disciplines, there are different approaches out there that are more crucial, to like being a designer as well, like growing and like bringing interdisciplinary fields in, and also going back to like, how do we bring care here? How do we bring the component of care, not just to the team, but also our work, also to our people we're working with? And like slowly and steadily, we are also bringing like trauma-informed approaches into our work as well. So what does it mean to be anti-racist in design? Also, if you have any thoughts around that, please put in the chat. I would love to read it of like, what do you think based on what I was talking about? What does it mean to be anti-racist in design? For me, it's identify, acknowledge, and act. These are the three pinpointed words for me. It's like you have to see what's happening to acknowledge it before you can even act on something. This is a definition that it's still a work in progress. Sometimes I say work in progress quite a lot with our team, is because we like constantly go back to the drawing board. If we have like a revelation, if we realize something, we're like, let's go back to the thing and see if we are actually doing what we said that we are doing. And so it's a work in progress of like saying anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organization structures, policies, and practices and attitudes, so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. So identify, acknowledge, act. If you have to take three things out of what is anti-racism, this is three for me. How does this show up in our work? And this I'm going to talk about in a way where how does it show up in our work, but also how it connects to me. We look for racism. Growing up in a different, of course, in a different context, like I grew up in India, you're aware about the situations around you. You know the kind of oppression there is, like casteism, sexism. And we as people of color, we know about it, we talk about it, we have sometimes faced it, and we've also sometimes acted on it. But it's so much as a part of our norm that these things are not like an active part of our day-to-day conversation. It's there in the background, it's not in the forefront, because it has somehow become so normal that, oh, this is how it is. But this doesn't have to be how it is. And from that, like remembering the time when I started and when I've been with ChiByDesign since day one, like I've seen that how the conversation that were on the background for me, or like I knew about them, became so much in forefront that since day one, I'm like these conversations, like discussions, questions that I have are such an active part of my day-to-day life that I didn't think it would be ever before. I'm always learning something new here. I'm always asking questions here of like, because it's a new culture, I'm adapting to a new culture, but also bringing discussions to the forefront lets me go back and identify certain different things that I saw growing up. So looking for racism and showing the work here and keeping it in the forefront rather than the background, I think is one of the very key components that we bring. Centering oppressed groups. People are not always users. We use this term very interchangeably when we work with people, but they're not always users. They are people who have been historically oppressed or are currently being oppressed, who have been harmed by the system. So the way we want to show up in our work by centering this is we want to bring their voices forward. We want to advocate for their perspective. We want to use our skills and knowledge that we have and our approaches to bring them together and advocate for their voice. My experience from growing up back in India is very different from here, but co-creating with people gives me a space to look into like systemically and like have a systemic understanding of the issues that I saw growing up. And I may or may not discuss it all the time, but at least gives me an insight into, oh, that's why it was, oh, I should look into this lens. So I always take back what I'm learning here to into like my own personal discussion, my own conversations. First, like identify what's been done, like look systemically and identifying what harm has been done, and not just like what harm has been done, but also identify what are some of the good things that the system has done, the people have done, communities have done to achieve equitable outcomes. And fourth, but not the least, prioritize BIPOC sources of information. This was like going beyond traditional like resources, which we call like weird, like Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Prioritizing BIPOC resources, there are like articles, podcasts, channels, research papers that are written by people of color, like women of color, youth that are out there that are equally good or sometimes better resources that you should refer to. And that's a practice that we are trying to involve more and more in our work. All of this, I think, how we show up in our work and how I don't have to separate myself from my personal life, this feeds so much into me going back and saying, improving my conversations with my family and my friends of like, it's so different to like how I approached my conversations before versus how I approach my conversations now. And it's not that I think that co-creation space, that space of like seeing what we believe in and how we translate that, I think in that process somewhere you start getting more clarity on some of the things that you might not have clarity on before. So this is how like I take my learnings from my like how I work here and like how I am leading this, like I'm in the design lead here and I'm leading this anti-racist design firm, but also it's informing a lot of like how I think. So as I talked about the different components here, I speak to like one of the projects that we did recently in fall 2020. It was about how racism in the Ohio Children's Services impacts the life of all individuals involved. And this was a project that we did with Ohio government, the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. And it was building on some of the work that they did in 2019 of identifying how systemic racism has been embedded in the policies and practices of those involved in the children's services system. So our work was to go identify that. It was a very exploratory research project. So during that project, as you can see in this report, like title itself, it's a very, the title is very out there. It's very bold, like how racism in the Ohio Children's Services system impacts the lives of all individuals involved. And the way I was talking about like how it shows up in our work and like the DNA, we also make sure that our approaches and our technique and our understanding and how we come together also is grounded in that. And one of the way that I was talking about, like bringing diverse perspective, is the composition of team. If you can see, like this is a picture here of one of our Zoom meetings. Everything started remote, so we have like screenshots of us on Zoom calls. This is a team, but this is not just all of the team. We had recently emancipated young people who were previously in foster care, who guided and corrected and led the work throughout the project, be a part of our team. They helped us to ensure that our protocols were appropriate and were sensitive to those who we interviewed and led to the most relevant insights. Their voices were very instrumental in developing and maintaining that sensitivity. And this is the project where we brought in the trauma-informed approach into our work, because we realized that a traditional way of going about it is not going to work. We are asking people to relive some of the harsh realities of their life. And if we are not providing them with care, we don't want to be like people who just extrapolate information from them. And we made sure that when this report was out, that it wasn't like our co-designers read it first, they approved it, and only then the report went to other people. As I talk about trauma-informed interviewing and care in our work, it was like, how do we bring care in our interviews? Like, we brought trauma-informed approaches to like, okay, we are going to make sure that our people have resources, that if something triggered them, we would give them a resource that they can go back to a mental health helpline or something, so that if something triggered them, they have a resource there. We want to provide care. We co-created like our protocols with people with lived experience. I often reflect on this, and I think I recently also had like a experience where in one of the meeting, I reflect on like, my God, like this works so hard sometimes because it's heavy. And you have to, in social design space, and when I was entering this field, I knew like, okay, this is the work I'm getting into, but I didn't realize how heavy it gets at times. And like, you take the thought back home. But if I think this is hard, think about who's living the reality and where they've been wrong, where they've been harmed. And it sometimes put our hearts in knots. And I think rather than shying away from it, I think something that brings us these moments, like bring us back together to that drawing board to say, what can we do to like advance our work? What practices can we bring to make the vision that we had more actionable? So I think it's the work that, it's like these moments which will be like, oh, this gets really heavy at times. We're like, okay, what do we need? What do we do? The other aspect that I talked about is like looking for racism, right? And I know the diagram might not be super clear, but there we have like one of my team members can send the report out where the diagram will be more clear to view. We found out that in this, and as we were doing the ethnographic research, that racism to be a significant root cause that was woven through and manifesting in all experiences and organizational structures that we examined. There were clear inconsistencies in policies and procedures that led to racial disparities for Black and mixed race young people. If you see these levels, it was like systems level, organizational level, experience level, like there was disparities like being highlighted and how they get connected and how people face the disparities. Even just by looking at this diagram, sometimes we like, there's constant discussion in our team when we say, do we go like big and like be bold, or do we subdue ourselves? But it's a conscious decision of presenting what we heard as we heard it and not changing it. So like form shy away from saying the ugly truth sometimes because it comes with a cost, and this is something we also get scared of. But as we co-created the vision, we have to be the boldest. So here we are. We have to say it as it is. And I think it's important to say that. It is important to bring those discussions to forefront. I think it just makes you comfortable with like facing these hard conversations, facing that, okay, what's the root cause of things? I wanted to bring in some of the themes and insights here that we heard during our project. Some of And the three of them, we had like many themes and insights, but the three that I wanted to highlight were like that Black voices and experiences are not valued. Even just like listening to someone saying, I don't think I would have gone through the same things. My voice would have been heard more. I would have had more options. I'm still not listened to. My siblings are still with my mom, even though she's not well. This is a quote. This is a quote from someone who, a Black youth who was formerly in the foster care system. Listening to things like this, and then a person like having like quotes, like people saying, like when they describe their experiences, like a person or youth not being able to feel safe at their home. When they say, I was confused about why I was being called the N-word, why I was at home where it was obvious that they couldn't love me like I'm their own kid. I've been in homes where I was the only Black person in the whole town and got called all types of names, and the foster parents never did anything. And we highlighted these things. We brought these things to the forefront. We showed in our report that this is what all's happening, and this is what the system currently looks like. And thankfully, this was taken in of course, there were very many hard truths in this, but it was taken with the feeling that, okay, we need to change this. And so now we are also working, we are expanding on this project and working on this year and next year on to seeing the entry and engagement of foster youth and families into the foster care system, Black and brown youth and families into the foster care system. I want to also mention that when we bring these things forward, when we create reports like this, and like we put it out in the public, the kind of impacts that it creates, like the impact doesn't always have to be like measured in monetary value. It has to be measured in like how, if the people who have been neglected by the system, if their voices have been heard or not, are we advocating for them? And if you're bringing that to the forefront, and if it slightly also nudges the system and changes the system to create impacts in people's life, we have done our job. There's so much more left for sure, but bringing those voices in the forefront and asking that, okay, these are the things that needs to change. It shifts the system. It creates some form of accountability. Recently, our report was also like referencing to Micaiah Bryant's murder case, and when it got circulated in our team, we were like our report's been like referred here. That was a very this was a thing that should have never happened to that person. But when you bring there's a hope that if this report is being referred, or if the voices through this report are being out there, there would be something the system would be doing, or the voices are being up in the forefront, and there will be some changes in the system. And like if people's life will be impacted for better, that's all what we're working for. With all of this saying, it's not like that we have got it 100% correct. We still have questions, we still have doubts. We constantly go back to the drawing board and see what's our practice. How can we help partners to understand anti-racism more and see the importance of utilizing that lens during the projects? How do we provide more care for interviews during our research phase? How do we connect the insights so that it's clear when it highlights the racist policies and practices? How do we maintain an anti-racist lens when crafting final reports? These are the questions that we still have, are we still developing on, we're still thinking on. And I think we're on the right track. This is my last thing. How do you, for being anti-racist in your work, these are some of the things that I think that we should be asking ourselves, of how are you being anti-racist in your work? But I would also like to know what you think should we be challenging and should we be thinking around to be more anti-racist in our work. I always push for how are you utilizing your own skills and how are you identifying and communicating racism within the system, or how are you using your skills and approaches, and you're going back inwards and identifying your own biases to see how your worldview, your perspective shapes your work. So these are some of the questions that I think one can think about for being more anti-racist in their work, but please feel free to drop in the chat of like, how do you think about it? And would love to hear that. And I'll stop speaking now. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful talk. So I have a few questions, and then if anyone else has any questions, you're more than welcome to raise your hand in Zoom, and then I'll call on you. You could unmute yourself, or you could just ask a question in the chat. But one, this is just a comment. Just looking at the work that you're doing and looking at that case study, it just amazes me to see how design is able to touch these different parts that you don't traditionally think of when you think of, design. I think for the most part, we tend to think that design is limited to just visuals. But it's just interesting to kind of see how the process is ingrained into so much of our lives. And I also really appreciate the list that you shared with us at the end. I took a screenshot, so I will definitely reference that. There you go. If anyone wants to take a screenshot of this, or I could also share it after the talk, but I think this is great. But the question that I have for you is, what, in the beginning, you were mentioning going through a process of unlearning a lot of just the behaviors and the patterns in your thinking and just the way design has been done. What was the process like for you as you were going through that unlearning? And I'm sure like it's an ongoing process.
It is definitely an ongoing process. My journey has just begun, so I'm pretty sure that I would have some very existential challenges upcoming in the future too. But I think when I was going through this process, I think my process involved a lot of like asking questions. I asked a lot of questions. It's like, why, and sometimes I was unaware. Sometimes I was like, I didn't know about certain things, but I think that something that I don't shy away from is asking the why. And I think that helps me get to some point. But then it was also that openness to and that adaptability to see that this is not necessarily the right way of doing things, or not necessarily the only way. Even when I was doing like visual communication design, there are certain things that you have to, you follow by. That, okay, this is a system, this is a grid system, this is that, like this is the color psychology, this is what it is. There's like blue and yellow are complementary colors, this and that. But that doesn't mean blue doesn't go with something else, And you can pair up with blue and green, you just have to be bold about it. You can pair up blue and violet, you have to be bold about it. And I think it was the curiosity, my openness, and like my why, and some form of ranting involved, that I think I was able to like switch gears and like be more open to see that, okay, oh, this makes sense. Sometimes think, oh, like why are things like this? Or no, we should do like that. More like a lot of debates, and I was like, okay, makes sense. If it makes sense, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever found yourself in a situation where you get pushback from a client or someone that is not used to this way of working? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we do get pushback. Even with this work, we did get pushback. Like, oh, we cannot say this thing. Oh, we have to be very mindful about, we can't use this term or this and that. And I think we also have a pushback. It's not like that we just take it. I think it takes a level of understanding of like why we want to say what we want to say, and also a conversation that, okay, no, this is what you hired us to. I hired us to tell you,
Mhm.
And if we don't tell you this, then we're not doing our job. And this is what we have, when we started on a journey to find out such and such things, so we have to be saying that. So I think there is pushback, but there's also like that pushback creates a space for you to reiterate why it's essential and like have a conversation and then make the other person see your viewpoint.
Okay. I like that. Here's a question in the chat from John. John says, when speaking to anti-racism and talking about equitable sharing of power, how do you define equitable within the framework of capitalism? It's a loaded question.
Very loaded question. Yeah. This reminds me of something that Chris says quite a bit. Equity cannot exist till the time capitalism is. And I think it's a very loaded question. I would think more on that.
Yeah.
I think like I can speak like equitable sharing of power. I think when we think of power, we think of influence, we think of authority. And when you're working, these are all like man-made structures. Like who said someone else has more authority than you? You have to challenge those norms. And I think when you're working together, you have to understand that the viewpoint that you bring may not be the viewpoint that someone else is bringing. The power that you might hold in a certain aspect might not be someone else's power, but that does not mean they don't hold power and have a viewpoint on something else. So it's not like who's better, who's not. It's like, how do we come together? What do you need to do your work or to be where you are versus what I need? Like, I think it's not about like, okay, let's give everyone the same thing. It's like, what do you individually need to come together to say that, okay, we are going to be in this together and share power and share responsibility, and not just say that, okay, that you hold a superior power over me. So I think for me, it's very much on like relationship and like also a lot on like how you view people and how you view structures. It's not just like, as I said before, like things doesn't have to be the way they are. Like if there is a supremacy on certain things in your own small way, you can create a more like a place which more equity based or like more equal or has space for every single person rather than okay, like, you know, we just create space for this one person or this one space, one work.
Okay, got it. There's another question from Marielle. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. In conducting qualitative research, the researcher becomes the instrument. In other words, the researcher collects data and analyzes it. How did you grapple with the limitations of your outsider identity not being a foster youth? And I see Chris.
Yeah. We as I was mentioning here as well, like we hired foster youth and we hire people work as a co-designers, as a teammate with us, who are, as I was talking about, like sharing power and like bringing their viewpoints in. But then they're not just there for like us analyzing things and them giving a feedback. And they're not just there as like as a participant. They are as a team member there. So they have, when we hire them, we equip them with resources, with like design expertise. We work with them, and they also like lead a lot of the work that we do. They have equal say in it. When we are even collecting and analyzing data, they are leading the interviews. They're also leading the synthesis. They're there to correct us. Very recently, I had an experience where we crafted our interview protocol and we were presenting. We were like, okay, hey, because we were a little late to the process. Like, hey, we started this, but we want to co-create with this with you. And the perspective and the viewpoint and the insight they brought, we would have never been able to do it. So it's not like we just analyze the data and like we'll just make everything and give it to them. It's like we co-create with them. Like we take that pretty seriously, like even within our own team. It's like, okay, no, let's make sure that they're involved. Let's make sure that we are all working together. So yeah.
Okay. And then I have a follow-up question to that. And then there's a few other people with questions, but was there any struggle or when trying to, did you ever feel like you had to gain the trust of the people that you were designing with? And did you almost have to, like, how'd you go about that? Because I've been in situations where I've almost had to speak their language, kind of take my designer hat off and find ways to, especially if you're talking to children, you know, not talk to them like they're, you know, clients or, you know.
So definitely you have to gain trust.
Mm-hmm.
You are asking them to share their personal stories with you. Why would someone do that if they don't really trust you and you haven't created a space where they feel that, okay, this is a space where I can say something and, you know, I won't be judged for it. I won't be, you know, no one's going to think some type of way about me. It's my story, my experience. So you definitely have to create that trust. And that's why we do like boot camps when we work with them in the beginning. During that whole time, our premise is to create trust. Our premise is to build a relationship with them. Even when we hire them, we have like a conversation with them on phone or sometimes like with this whole digital world right now, it's just Zoom and phone. But if we can meet them, that'd be great too at some point. I would love to meet our co-designers. But like have a phone conversation or on Zoom to like tell them about us, who we are, what we do. If you have to gain trust, like you can't just expect the other person to share your story and you don't say anything or you don't share something. It's a two-way street. And you have to, building a trust also like being very transparent, you know, like this is what we are, this is what we are doing. Even if you don't know about certain things, we don't have clarity on it, like being very transparent, very clear about this and very clear about expectation, very clear about like, okay, what we are trying to do. That's where that care and trust component comes in. So yes, like it's, we do know that this is a very crucial piece. And that's why like a lot of front load of our work is very much in building that.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like vulnerability is a big aspect. Okay.
Vulnerability and transparency.
Anyone else have questions?
I have a question actually. I was wondering, I love this talk. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And I was wondering, you know, in this idea of like this co-creative anti-racist design, can you share with me at all like what you and your team's thoughts have been about like the future vision for this process? Like what things could be like utilizing this process, like if designers utilize this process more often?
Mm-hmm. I think we have talked about this and we are still in the process of developing of like what it looks like in future. And as I was talking about these different approaches and like how we are working through it, we are also in the process of developing like different tools and frameworks and testing it out and like working with the people we are working with and seeing if it makes sense and if it's something that, you know, contributes to the work that we are doing and like how can we be more anti-racist in our process, in the design process at every stage. So that's what is looking like in future for us right now, is like how do we advance our own practice. Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome.
I know we're almost at time, but there's two more questions. Is that okay if you take them, or you have a hard stop? Just want to be mindful.
I can stay for longer.
Okay. So the first question that we have here is from Tara. The question is, how do you implement this framework in corporate settings when diversity and inclusion is your priority without being anti-racist or eliminating racism in the system?
So till now, we haven't worked with any corporate clients. That is something we are still working to identify that if at all we are going to be working with a corporate client, what does that look like for us? And when I say what does that look like for us is like, what are some things that we are going to say that it's a red flag for us, or some things that we want to make sure that the client has before we work with them. So we also assess we are also trying to see if we can assess the work that comes through us. We have sometimes rejected opportunities that that does not abide with or does not align with our purpose and align with our mindset. So till now we haven't interacted with the corporate client, but I would take this question and see if we have this issue, like how do we go about that?
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I believe that's it. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone that asked questions and joined us here tonight. This was super, super helpful. And it's definitely I'm definitely going to take away a lot of these teachings over into my personal work. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing the work that you continue to do and the work that ChiByDesign continues to do. I think it's very important. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and asking me these questions. They were really good questions. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. And let's keep in touch.
Yes.
All right. Talk soon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Surbhi. That was awesome.
Thank you.